Hey folks, welcome back to Markelly Farm. We're here in the kitchen. Can't do much outside today because we're under a tornado warning right now, but it looks like it's going to go to the southeast of us. So we're going to hang around inside. We might go out in the shop because it's not raining in the shop anymore, so maybe we'll do that. I went by the mailbox today and we had a surprise in the mail. We got a package from one of our subscribers, one of our new subscribers, a lady by the name of Debbie Yarham or Yarham. I apologize if I butcher your name, but I don't know the pronunciation. It says, hi, thanks for sharing your lives with us. Have not been a subscriber for very long, but I believe I have binge watched all your videos. Boy, that would be a chore. We got quite a few videos. God bless Debbie Yarham. I believe you collect the enclosed, and she enclosed a pie bird. So now I know she's been watching the channel because we mentioned that we collected those one time. We have our pie bird collection down here. It all started with Kelly's grandma's pie bird right here. So we've got a spot for your pie bird right there. We got some pretty cool ones. This is not exactly a bird. This one's like a little Red Riding Hood. But you can always tell they're for pie vents because they'll have these notches in the bottom here and then an opening on top. This one's cool. It's actually two birds in one. Remember the old song, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie? That one's cool. And then we have a parrot back there in the back. Got some exotic ones. This one's kind of cool. This one's very different. It's got the vents here on the base. I don't even know it's a pie bird, but it was sold as a pie bird. Now, I found many people lately, because I'll go to antique shops and I'll ask right away because they usually know their inventory. I'll say, do you have any pie birds? And they go, what's a pie bird? I'm like, you don't know what a pie bird is? I said, no, never heard of it. So I have to explain it to them. And they said, oh, maybe. But it hasn't been that long ago, I wouldn't think. But these were vents that people would put like in a double crust pie. The top of the bird would be poking up through the middle of the crust. And as the steam built up on the bottom, it would come up through that vent and vent your pie. You know how they cut slits in the top of the pie now as a vent? They used to use these little ceramic birds as the vent in the pie. So thank you, Deborah. We have the best subscribers in the world, I tell you. We just love all you guys. Deborah's from Nixa, Missouri, so not too far from us, just kind of southeast of us. So thanks again. We really love it. Well, since the last time you were in the shop with us, we've stopped throwing things. So let's get over here to the cub. If you remember, we had a pretty good setback on the cub last time. And there's no time but the present to get going on this thing, so I'll show you what we got to do. So if you remember last time, we started having water seep out of these old repairs here. I believe this was JB Weld, which at the time would be fine because I found out since the last time we spoke that this is a non-pressure or low-pressure cooling system here on the tractor. So it doesn't really build a lot of pressure unless for some reason you're overheating, which shouldn't be going on if everything is cool. But I've talked to some people on our Cub forum who said JB Weld is an acceptable repair. Unfortunately, this one has give way. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to take all of these radiator bolts out. They go all the way around. I've got a new gasket on order. And we're going to have to replace the hoses anyway because it's just a good idea to do it right here. There's hose top and bottom, and then there's also hoses for the air cleaner. Down here there's 2 air hoses, one here for the air intake. So we've got those on order too. We just got the hose kit coming. So once we get this radiator off, we'll scrape the gasket surface real well. And this is cast iron, which is not easy to repair, but we need to get all this old JB weld off of here, and I've been told that heat will do the trick. It'll come off there like hardened Play-Doh, I'm hearing, once you put the heat to it. I'm guessing they probably didn't gouge out the cracks at all, but once we get this off, and if we can see the cracks, we'll V the crack out a little bit, and then we're going to braze this with some brazing rod. And like I said, cast iron is not the easiest thing to do, but it can be done, and it's worth doing, because I checked on one of these front bolsters, which is this unit that bolts right here to the front of the engine and holds the front steering, the steering gear here for your steering wheel, and it actually has a bottom radiator tank. This whole thing down here is full of water, and your crank goes through it also for the hand crank, but it acts as your lower radiator tank, and they're $475 for not a new one, but new old one. So before we go to that expense, I want to try to braze this. I believe we have the skills to get it done. So let's start pulling this radiator off. Enough talk. We just put these bolts in. Pulling this radiator has proven to be quite an ordeal. To get to the bottom radiator bolts, we've got to take this shroud and the fan off, and we can't do that until we pull all this stuff off. We got to pull the generator. We have to pull the air cleaner on the other side, which we just found out our oil cup on the bottom leaks, and it leaked all that oil out that we put in it the other day. I think the only thing that was leaving the oil that was in it was the sludge on the bottom. And then I've been fighting this screw right here, back and forth, won't come up, and the head was already stripped. Finally got that screw out. What a pain. Literally an hour job for this one screw, working it back and forth, little by little, penetrating oil little by little. Finally had to use a pair of pliers to get it the rest of the way out. I am putting hex screws back in there. I'm not doing this flathead nonsense anymore. So the shroud's loose. We've got our air cleaner off. We got the generator off. I think we can undo this bolt here to get the radiator fan off. And then all of this should slide up maybe, but looks like we're going to maybe hit the hose here. But whoever engineered this, no thanks. Do yourself a favor when you're taking stuff like this apart. Get you some quart or sandwich size Ziploc bags right on there where your bolts are coming from. That way you don't start losing stuff. So it looks like now that the shroud is out of the way, I can get to these bolts with a long extension from the top up here. We'll bring that over here. We'll get those bolts out. We were able to get the rest of our bolts out, and then I also removed the water neck from the top of the head here, because I figure this radiator is going to need to set straight down onto the bolster, and it's going to be a lot easier to put the hose on this way and screw that water neck down than try to get this radiator to go into the hose. So these side pieces should come right off now, just like that. So we'll take those off, and then we should be able to pull the radiator off. I don't want to pry around on this radiator and cause a problem, so we'll get a scraper, and we'll kind of bump a scraper up underneath that bottom flange to break it loose. We don't want to break anything loose with this old radiator. Now I'm guessing back here there should be another hold down plate like this one, but there wasn't. So we may have to order another one of these for the back side. Here's our bolster. You can see the cracks go all the way through here in 3 places. So now what we're doing is we're heating up the JB weld to get it off. It doesn't appear like they V'd this out at all when they put that JB weld in there. So just heat the JB weld up with a torch, and then it just scrapes right off like clay without a problem. Just hardens it really hard. Pops right off. So we'll get the rest of this cleaned up. So as we were heating the JB weld to get it up out of the crack, when I started scraping, this whole piece just kind of fell loose. So it was broke all the way through when they JB welded this thing. And because it's broke in the middle, you're never going to have, you know, a rigid place there. It's always going to buckle and move around. So this has to be welded solid to work at all. So what we might do is we'll fix this area first. We'll clamp this to a real nice straight edge, because this piece we can get a good weld top and bottom. We can V it out all the way through. And if we can get this piece put together rigidly, then we could probably weld this and it'd be a lot stronger if we can get this to stick. But we'll let this cool off. We'll clean this up a little bit. I don't know if we're going to get this welded today. We might have to see you again in the morning. But we'll bring you back. Now that we can touch this, there's JB weld on the bottom. So it looks like they had this piece out and JB welded it. So they could do it on the bottom, turn it over, and then just JB welded the top of the rest of this. So we'll clean all this off too. What I was thinking is I'm going to get a piece of like 1/2 by 1.5 inches. So we'll get a piece that's this long, and we'll find out the centers on these bolts, and we'll drill all 8 bolts, and then we can bolt this thing together, keeping all the alignment right. We'll fix this one because we can weld this top and bottom, and then we'll probably bolt everything in here nice and flat, and then braze this other repair here. So here's our 2 pieces that broke off of our bolster, and this is the part we're going to weld first. So what we need to do now, after we've cleaned this up a little bit, we've got all the JB weld off of it, we want to grind this top corner off so we can V it out, get a nice weld in there. We only want to go about halfway through because we want to leave this bottom side to index the other piece so the brake fits together perfectly. So we'll leave that, and then we'll get that prepared to weld. We're going to clamp it down on our nice flat straight edge. This is the flattest edge of my table. I put a straight edge on it. We're perfectly flat. Now I thought I had some nickel rod, but I got some cast iron rod, which this is cast iron or cast steel, I don't know which. But I need to go down to get some nickel rod. This cast iron rod welds a little dirtier than I want. So we'll go to town and we'll be right back. Alright, we're back from town. We got our nickel 55 rod. We've got our piece set up. I've got the sealing surface of the radiator clamped down to the table. There's a little step on that, but we want to make sure the sealing surface is perfectly flat. This side over here is not as critical, but it's still where it needs to be. We've got that all V'd out, ready to go. And so now we're going to heat up this whole piece, including the table, everything. We're going to heat this up pretty hot, probably 500 degrees or better. And then we'll be able to weld this. And then after we weld it, we'll want to cool it really slow. We have our chipping hammer here. You can see it's not a real sharp pointed chipping hammer, but we'll weld a little bit and then we'll chip it, peen it down a little bit, and then we'll do some more. But we'll start on this outside edge out here. We'll probably weld probably to the middle, and then we'll start from this outside edge and weld to the middle. Because the outside edges are the ones that if you get too hot, if you run your bead across and stop there, sometimes that'll get too hot and just fall out. But if you start there, you'll get a good cooler start and you're less likely for this material to fall out. So let's get our welder set up for stick welding. Right now it's set up for MIG, so we'll switch it over. Alright, got our welder switched over. All we got to do is unplug our MIG lead out of the positive, then plug our stick welding lead into there. And then we have to come over here, change the function down to stick weld. We've got 332, which is the size of our rod. It says 6011, but as close as we can get to it. We've got the 1/8 inch material, which allows us to go down to 70 amps is what we want. Our leads or our electrodes say to weld from 50 to 70 amps. So we're going to go on the higher end of that. So let's get this heated up and we'll be ready to burn it. All right, got that welded. I threw my welding apron over top of it. We want to hold as much heat in there as we can. Most people have like asbestos blankets, like welding blankets, but this will do. I heated the table up as well, so the table's nice and warm, so it'll cool down slow. I even started the wood stove, take the chill off in the air in here in the shop. But when that cools off, we'll get it cleaned up and turned over. We'll weld the other side. Got it clamped to a piece of angle iron now. We're going to weld half of it. Going to reheat it again. Keep it from moving around. It's going to want to pull up on the outside, so that's why we got it clamped on the outside. We'll weld half of it, and then we'll pull the angle iron off, and we'll weld the other half. All right, we've got it welded both sides. Got a real good bead in there, nice fillet. So we're going to take it and we're going to throw it on top of the stove because the stove's cooling off, but it's still hot. So it'll keep it warm and cool it down real slow with the stove. While our part is cooling over there, we've got our piece of brace metal that we're going to use to weld this front piece on. We've determined that our holes are 1 7/8 inches apart. So we have that laid out on our piece. So we're going to drill holes 1 7/8 inches apart. And this thing will be ready to go once we're ready to weld this piece in. Now our drill press, I have our table and our table lock back here, both locks locked. So as I push the piece of metal through the vise, all of those holes will stay on the exact same line, because we need them perfectly lined up. So these bolts are 5/16, so I got a 5/16 18 bottoming tap, which means it just got a flat end on it instead of pointed, so it gets to the bottom of the hole. There's a lot of junk in these holes that we need to clean out, and then we'll blow them all out real good. And that way our bolts will go all the way in and not get tight before they need to. See how much junk came out of there? And we got pretty new threads. Okay, here's our piece bolted in. Got all the nuts snugged up pretty tight. I got 3 washers on there just to make up for the lack of flanges and stuff. But we're pretty even all the way across. We should be real good on the bolt pattern because we set it up that way. So I think we're going to get the nickel rod. I know I said I was going to braze all this, but that nickel rod's running good enough. I think we're going to do all this with the nickel rod. And we're going to have to get this bolster really hot. So I drained all the oil out of the gearbox here so we wouldn't cause any problems there. This whole thing needs to be really warm to work. So we'll get the torch out. We'll get this thing heated up. And then we'll get to welding. Now, if you don't know what metal looks like at the right temperature you want, 400 degrees, the metal will turn like a straw yellow. And then about 500 degrees, it'll turn blue. We want to get beyond the blue to where it's almost a gray. And then our temperature will be right. Now, this is a lot more mass down here than this little piece. So we're going to have to concentrate our heat on the bolster here, because this is just kind of heat up on its own. But being it's such a big mass, it'll want to cool off faster than this, because all the cold from back here is going to push all that heat out. So it's going to take a while to heat up. All right, folks, I got that welded up. That was a long process, and I had a crack appear right before my eyes because I wasn't heating it in between welding. I got a little greedy, so I had to V that crack out, heat it, weld it. So now we're done. I got my welding apron draped over the top. Probably going to burn it, but I don't want this thing to crack again. I kind of want to walk away from this thing and go do something else for a bit, but I kind of want to stick around and listen, because you're going to hear it fail before you see it fail. You'll hear a tink, and that means you got another crack. So far, no tinks. So good news so far. Well, it's been about 20 minutes and no noises, so I think it's safe to get out of the shop for a bit. I'll bring you back when we uncover it, it's cooled off, and we can machine it down a little bit. Well, I say machine it, but we'll be sanding it. So see you then. Okay, folks, there it is all welded up. Not the prettiest of welds, but the gaps have been filled, and that's all that's important. Had to overlap some of our starts and stops to make sure we didn't get any occlusions in there. So now we're going to get this thing cleaned up. Well, there it is all cleaned up. I'm pretty positive it's not going to leak. I did some Oki machining, and I did the belt sander on the top, so the top face where the radiator bolt should be nice and flat, and then we just cleaned everything else up. Much better than JB Weld, and I think it'll be a little sturdier. Now, even if we do get just a little seep somewhere, little pinholes, easy to deal with, that would be an acceptable use for JB Weld. Just machine it out a little bit and lay some JB Weld in that little hole, and that would take care of it. Again, this is not a pressurized system, but at least the whole piece isn't going to fall out into the radiator, and I could probably get these bolts tight without cracking it like I did before. Well, folks, we'd love to continue the video and put all this back together, but we've got a lot of cleaning to do thanks to that leaky air filter over there. Leaked all the oil out, got oil all over that corner of the motor over there. So we've got to clean all of this up and paint it before we can go back together. We got to put the gearbox back together here, put oil back in that. Probably get a new seal for our steering arm here. Looks like it needed one. So just some odds and ends before we can start putting this thing back together. We have to paint the hood, obviously, and paint all these parts, clean all these parts up, and we still have parts in our bin there that need to be cleaned up and painted. But we're getting closer all the time to a parade-ready tractor. We already know it runs. We are planning on checking the compression on it here pretty soon if you had a question about that. So stay tuned. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We're glad you came along with us today. So we'll see you next time here on the farm. We've got lots and lots more to do.